제 젬벌 솔던 닝미장 몸은 젬벌 나기한다 아까라다 엄선도 셔나 tumda terje janla kisham sar.
The supreme, profound, and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all sentient beings, please give rise to the supreme bodhicitta. Today we will continue with our teaching on entering the middle way by Chandra Kirti. This series might take dozens of classes. It's hard to say for sure right now. Not long ago and in previous classes I have mentioned that these teachings on the middle way are very important for everyone. This is because the essence of all the Buddha's 84,000 teachings is actually the prajna paramita or emptiness. There are so many prajna scriptures, such as the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 8,000 lines, the Perfection of Wisdom in 20,000 lines, the verse summary of Prajna Paramita, and the shortest Prajna Paramita in one letter. If we were to study and practice each of these teachings one by one, it would be very difficult to accomplish in this short lifetime. Under these circumstances, studying a middle way treatise that contains pith instructions is extremely important. Therefore, in Tibetan Buddhism, all the great masters agree that the three middle way treatises are essential. They are mandatory subjects of study. These are the root stanzas of the middle way mentioned earlier, the 400 stanzas on the middle way and entering the middle way. Personally, I have immense faith in these three treatises. If there is any realization or even a slight understanding of the prajna teachings within my own mind stream, it must have come from these teachings, especially from entering the middle way. That's why I think all of you here should also study it diligently. Although due to various circumstances we cannot all gather together in person to listen, I believe that in this dreamlike world, as long as we have a virtuous heart, then all the necessary conditions can also be created within this dreamlike reality. So I make a vow and a prayer that we may receive and gain the exact same benefits together. I also pray for this blessing for you, for each and every one of you, as long as you listen to this class with a heart of strong faith in the middle way and maintain such a state of mind, then regardless of the method, whether it's through video or audio, you will equally receive the same merits and benefits. It's merits and benefits. Therefore, in this special era, we should also make use of skillful means to ensure we don't interrupt our most important practice of listening, contemplating, and meditating. I haven't taught this treatise for about 30 years. I taught it many times in the early days, but not recently. Now, during this year and the next, I was wondering if I could finish sharing the entire teaching with everyone. If so, for me, this might be the last time I teach entering the middle way. If I were to teach it again, it would probably be many years later, which can't be helped, and whether that's even realistic is hard to say. So perhaps this is the final time. Regardless, many masters say that when a teacher gives their final class, one must listen carefully. There is such a saying. If such a saying really holds true, then for the middle way teachings, I can say that everyone should use these convenient methods to complete the entire series. I know many people now sit at home, turn on their computers, light a stick of incense, and very earnestly listen to every single lesson. As long as your intention is pure, the Dharma from books or recordings is easily accessible. As I mentioned before, in the past, to make a recording was very difficult in terms of both finances and manpower, but now we don't need to struggle so much. Everyone can easily receive all the wisdom contained herein. This is something truly worth receiving and cherishing. You should strive for it. Actually, each of us should have a plan for the year, such as how many classes to attend and what virtuous deeds to do. There should at least be a plan. For each month, one should also have a plan for what to do. What will I do in the first half and the second half of the month? And for each day, from morning until night, what will I do in the morning and afternoon? In this way, your life can be meaningful. Otherwise, we live in a state of daze, lacking awareness, just drifting through each day. If so, wasting your life has little meaning. So let us all work together to study entering the middle way. To me personally, I feel this is very meaningful. I hope those who receive these recordings will benefit from them. We don't have many people here in person. In the past, there were at least hundreds. Now, if there are 2 or 3 more people, it already feels like a big crowd. That's just how it is. But regardless, we aren't seeking gain or loss. The most important thing is to keep this stream of sound and this stream of form or images, or rather this lineage of Dharma, flowing forward. This is what matters most. Today we will continue. We are now at the Second Bhumi, discussing the perfection of wisdom, specifically the content of the second chapter. We finished the first Bhumi on the perfection of generosity. Now we should talk about the perfection of ethical discipline. Within the perfection of ethical discipline, when explaining these principles regarding the faults of not maintaining ethical discipline, we divided them into 4 aspects in the last session. As for the third one, I mentioned back then that it would be best if everyone could memorize this verse. When we have our freedom and live in favorable conditions, we must make an effort. If we don't sustain our practice and fall into the 3 lower realms where we are driven by others, then under such conditions, how could we possibly attain liberation? This verse is like a miniature entering the middle way in itself. You should try to memorize it and understand it well. Oh, the sound of firecrackers. It's fine. Today we will continue with the 4th point in the outline. Why ethical discipline is taught after generosity in order to eliminate faults. That is our main topic. Now this point, therefore, having engaged in the discourse on generosity, the victors immediately taught Shila, ethical discipline. It is mentioned here that if one doesn't maintain ethical discipline, there are many faults. Without discipline, there are numerous issues. So, to eliminate these faults among the 6 perfections, the Buddha first taught the perfection of generosity. After finishing that, he immediately began teaching the perfection of ethical discipline. We often say generosity, discipline, but why teach generosity first, followed by discipline? The reason is this. It says, therefore, the one who has conquered all negativity, the great compassionate one, the awakened one, the Buddha has us sentient beings practice generosity first, so that the merits of our listening, contemplation, and practice aren't exhausted. To ensure this, he teaches ethical discipline right after generosity. Discipline follows immediately. And why is that? The reason is that if we only practice generosity, certainly the karmic result of that will definitely be abundance of wealth, a fine appearance, and so on, all kinds of fortunes in the higher realms. But if you don't go on to maintain ethical discipline, then those virtuous results cannot be reinforced or stabilized. In a very short time, you might exhaust the rewards of your previous generosity and then continue to fall back down. That is a very dangerous situation. So, to ensure that our merits from generosity and other deeds are never exhausted, and that these merits continue to grow, sustained by all kinds of virtue, for this reason the Buddha immediately taught ethical discipline, and this is indeed the case. If someone has good fortune, it is certainly because they practiced generosity or other such virtues before. But if they don't maintain ethical discipline well, then in a very short time the merits they once had will be completely destroyed. It's the same for people in the secular world. Even if some people in a certain sense achieve certain benefits or success, if they then commit all kinds of evil, eventually their whole life will be ruined. It's like what I've mentioned before. Ernest Hemingway won the Nobel Prize in Literature. In that regard, everyone was very envious. He had that kind of merit which is worthy of everyone's praise. But there was a dark side to him. Ever since he was a child, his father loved killing. So when he was 3 or only a few years old, his father constantly provided him fishing gear and hunting rifles for killing. Because he killed countless beings throughout his life, he suffered car accidents and plane crashes. At one point, his body was shot by enemies. Over 300 bullets were lodged in his body. When he eventually died, he used the same hunting rifle that had killed countless animals, put the rifle in his mouth, and took his own life. If his conduct had been more in accordance with the Dharma and more in line with the Dharma, he might have lived a happy life in this world and found happiness in the next. In our real lives today, some people may have exceptional karmic merits from past generosity, and they should be doing well in all aspects. But because their behavior is not aligned with the Dharma or lacks discipline, and they commit all sorts of negative deeds for this very reason, the latter half of their life or their future lives are tragic. This is why the Buddha taught ethical discipline after generosity. In truth, people in our daily lives are the same. Some possess great fortune in a certain sense, but because they lack a code of conduct, and for that reason fail to observe discipline and neglect to regulate their behavior, they bring immense suffering to themselves and others. Furthermore, if there is only generosity without discipline, the merits of that generosity will be lost in a very short time. With discipline as a foundation, other virtuous actions gradually increase and become the cause for liberation. To achieve liberation, one must practice generosity and upon that foundation maintain discipline. So while discussing the second bhumi in entering the middle way, we must acknowledge that cannot have discipline as pure as a second bhumi bodhisattva. However, monastics should follow monastic precepts, holding to them as much as possible. Lay people, whether they observe the 8 precepts, take refuge in the triple gem, or take the lay precepts, which consist of various rules, must use these rules to restrain themselves. This is currently very important. If you have this foundation of discipline, then future rewards in the higher realms will also have a base. Without even a few basic precepts, it will be extremely difficult to establish the causes for rebirth in a good realm. This is something we have already discussed elsewhere. So, the main point here is that to preserve our merits, we must let discipline sustain them. It's like a person who earns a lot of money but doesn't put it in the bank. If he spends it all on partying every day, it will be exhausted in no time, and he will have no resources left. There are many reasons why discipline is taught after generosity. There are many reasons. Next, we will discuss how discipline is the basis for all merits.
소수 기월 남당 송께당 랑샹 쳬블라 더니 니남다 제트 남지 니브르 럭바당 문투리는 츠점 레어젠 메드
Discipline is the root of all virtues. This means for ordinary beings, the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas, higher rebirth and definite excellence, have no cause other than ethical discipline. It says here that whether for worldly or wait, I skipped a part in the middle, the merits of discipline. Sometimes
요는 츠점 장더 남페르남 레니쇼 차파 메프른지르
in the field of Shila, merits grow, the fruits of enjoyment never end. This refers to the nature of the merits of keeping discipline. Previously, I mentioned the faults of breaking it. Regarding the merits of keeping it, Shila is the Sanskrit word meaning coolness or ethical discipline. In the fertile field of Shila, virtues can grow, that is to say, all the merits from our listening, contemplation, practice, and generosity. Where exactly do the fruits of such merits grow? They grow within the fertile field of ethical discipline. If we have the field of ethical discipline as our foundation, then all merits enter a virtuous cycle. In other words, virtue builds upon virtue. They won't be exhausted or cut short in the middle. Instead, they will grow and increase continuously. As the karmic results become more and more superior, the benefits one receives will also be truly inexhaustible. So generally speaking, all of these precepts, while generosity can bring one to higher realms, it is ethical discipline that gradually becomes the cause for liberation. Simply practicing generosity alone cannot reliably lead one to the higher realms without the foundation of ethical discipline. We mentioned this earlier and we will discuss it later as well. It is like having no foundation at all. As it says in the Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, ethical discipline is the foundation of all things, the root of all virtues. Just as it is stated here, all merits arise by relying on ethical discipline. Now regarding this, in this current age of Dharma decline, whether monastics or lay people, many people feel that taking precepts seems like a kind of restraint, as if they are losing their freedom. They think if I'm not free, it limits me. So they are quite unwilling to take precepts. On the surface, taking precepts does seem to limit your body, speech, and mind. But in reality, in any code of conduct, we don't just do whatever we want. As long as your behavior is regulated, it becomes a wonderful cause for happiness. We should understand this point. So it is said here that if one has ethical discipline, then all merits will be endless and continue to grow. Without this foundation, merits may be exhausted in a very short time and never arise again. Therefore, this is extremely important. I have just recited this verse for everyone. Second, discipline is the basis for all merits. I've already recited the verse earlier. It means ordinary beings, referring to all mundane beings. Born of the Buddha's speech refers to Shravakas. This is because after hearing the Buddha's words, they attained realization. They are called speech-born or born of the Buddha's speech. Then self-realized Bodhi. These are those who in this life do not rely on a Buddha nor on other companions. Relying on the power of their past cultivation and their practice on the 12 links of dependent origination, they personally realize bodhisattva in this very life. They are called pratyeka Buddhas or solitary realizers. The solitary realizers mentioned earlier, then sons of the Buddhas, these are bodhisattvas from the first Bhumi to the 10th Bhumi. The meaning is whether they are all the ordinary beings in the world, all the Shravakas, all the Pratyeka Buddhas, or all the Buddhas, in fact, for their future higher rebirth and definite excellence. Higher rebirth refers to the fortune of being born as a human or god in higher realms, and definite excellence is complete liberation, attaining the supreme and definite liberation such as the state of a Shravaka, a Pratyeka Buddha, a Bodhisattva, or even the state of a Buddha. It means that for all higher rebirths and definite excellence, what is the primary and fundamental cause? It is ethical discipline, holding the precepts. Other than ethical discipline, there is certainly no other. So it says here, no cause other than discipline. There is nothing else. Of course, regarding this foundation, it doesn't literally mean that aside from discipline, all other 5 perfections are unnecessary. That's not what it means. For example, for crops to grow here, the earth is the foundation. But besides the earth, are there other foundations? Yes, there are. For instance, in addition to the earth, one probably also needs water, sunlight, and various other conditions. But because this cause is so fundamental and vital, it is mentioned here as the most crucial factor. Thus it says there is no other, though it doesn't mean others are absolutely non-existent. But this one is essential. It is explained from this perspective. In the auto-commentary on entering the middle way, the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis is cited. After citing the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis, it essentially explains that for definite excellence and higher rebirth, the primary cause is to first abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions. I also mentioned in a previous class that many people nowadays consider themselves to be good people, but if you are good, that so-called goodness is not just your own opinion of yourself. The basic standard should be whether one avoids the 10 non-virtuous actions. If you are someone who does not commit the 10 non-virtuous actions, then you are a good person. We can put it that way, strictly speaking. If we talk about precepts prescribed by the Buddha or Bodhisattva vows, the requirements are even higher. But judging by the basic standards of the world, to be a truly good person, one must be someone who does not commit the 10 non-virtuous actions. If one commits these 10 non-virtues, it becomes extremely difficult to attain. It would be very difficult to achieve higher rebirth and definite excellence, because in the auto-commentary it actually describes the karmic results of committing the 10 non-virtues. These are classified as ripening results, vipaka. For ripening results, the 10 non-virtues are divided into great, medium, and small degrees. If committed to a great degree, one falls into the hells. If to a medium degree, one falls into the hungry ghost realm. And if the degree is small, one might fall into the animal realm. Furthermore, each of these non-virtues carries 2 types of ripening results. For example, the first one, killing, its ripening result is a short life and much illness. Such is the retribution. If one commits theft or taking what is not given, one will experience poverty in this life, or have to share their possessions with others. Third, if one commits sexual misconduct, one generally fails to have a compatible spouse, or faces marital discord and so on. Fourth, if one speaks lies, it leads to being slandered in this life, and one will often be deceived by others. If we use divisive speech, your circle of family and friends will be in discord, and your relatives and friends will all be difficult and unharmonious. If we use harsh speech, it leads us in this life to hear many unpleasant sounds and to be constantly embroiled in arguments. If one uses idle chatter, your words will not be respected by others, and even when you speak, you won't be able to convey much sense. Your words carry no weight. It's the same for the mind. Seventh, if there was covetousness in past lives, the mind will be discontent and insatiably greedy. If there is ill will, one is frequently scolded by others and suffers harm from them. If one holds wrong views, they will be reborn into a family with wrong views, frequently be deceived by others and experience deceit themselves, and so on. Of course, here I just mentioned ripening results. Actually, for ripening results, when reborn as a human, you will see these karmic retributions manifest. I was talking about ripening results just now. Actually, logically speaking, what I was just describing, as we find in the words of my perfect teacher and elsewhere, is called results similar to the cause. Among these results, there are experiential results similar to the cause and behavioral results similar to the cause. There are these 2 aspects. However, experiential results similar to the cause and ripening results are basically explained as having the same meaning in the auto-commentary on entering the middle way. This is also reasonable. It is said that in the Abhidharma, the propelling karma can be termed a ripening result. Also, from the Madhyamaka perspective, if ripening results and results similar to the cause share the same name, there is no fault or contradiction. Just like the merits above the eighth bhumi for bodhisattvas, which are often called ripening merits. And for instance, when we talk about the Dharmakaya in terms of the four application in the ornament of clear realization, the four applications are also referred to as ripening results. The Dharmakaya is sometimes called a ripening result as well. So regarding some merits of bodhisattvas, according to Gorampa's view, calling them ripening results is not unreasonable. Therefore, if one commits these negative deeds, whether it's the ripening retribution or the results similar to the cause, various unpleasant outcomes in life will manifest in this very life. Not to mention other consequences, including environmental results, results of personal experience, and so on. These results are also very terrifying. And conversely, for those of us who hold precepts and practice the 10 virtues, by practicing the 10 virtues, not only do we avoid these negative retributions, but on the contrary, for instance, if one refrains from killing and protects life, one will enjoy longevity and health. If one does not steal, one will enjoy abundant wealth, and so on. In this way, these merits are naturally complete. One is reborn in the human or celestial realms, enjoying all the fortunes of humans and gods. Ultimately, one attains the state of a Shravaka, a Pratyeka Buddha, a Bodhisattva, or even a Buddha. Therefore, in this world, there is actually a great need to maintain ethical discipline. With discipline, there is hope for the 3 types of enlightenment. For example, by keeping the Shravaka precepts, one attains the Shravaka state based on renunciation. Based on that renunciation, by further contemplating dependent origination and emptiness, one may attain the state of a Pratyeka Buddha. By practicing with bodhicitta and non-dual wisdom, one attains the states of bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Thus, if we do not seek liberation in this world, that is another matter. There are so many people on this earth right now. The vast majority of them do not seek liberation. If we are just like them, then there is nothing more to say. But if we have truly encountered the Buddhita Dharma and virtuous teachers in this life, and we wish to attain liberation in this life or the next, we must value ethical discipline. Only with the foundation of discipline is there any hope for our liberation. So here the primary focus is the merit of discipline. In reality, for any happiness in the world, any merit or any liberation, ethical discipline is incredibly important. Indeed, many great masters of the past placed immense emphasis on discipline. And this emphasis is not because they want to restrict you. It is not like that. The reason many masters have you take precepts and ask you not to break them is primarily for your own good. Whether you take precepts or not makes no personal difference to the Guru or the Sangha. But for us sentient beings, if we are reckless and undisciplined in our actions, lacking mindfulness and self-restraint, we will only fall further and further. Is it not the same in the secular world? Anyone with a bit of nobility will hold themselves to high standards. They don't just do whatever pops into their head. They have mindfulness and constantly observe their own mind. Oh, I can't do that. As a human being, I shouldn't do that. As someone in a certain role, this would be shameful. Doing this would be bad for me in this life and bad for others as well. It's bad for the social atmosphere around me, bad for how others perceive me, and bad in every way. Many people keep precepts. Some might think discipline is only something to be kept within Buddhism, and that secular people don't need it. In fact, whether in Buddhism or for any ordinary person, it's the same. Everyone has feelings and experiences. But when these are explained clearly in Buddhism, we can consciously restrain ourselves, which brings great benefit to ourselves. So it has already been stated here that discipline is very important. The point of the verse is that whether one is an ordinary being or a noble one, taking precepts is still very important. Even for bodhisattvas, they have the bodhisattva vows. Those in the secret mantrayana have samaya vows. All of these exist. So these precepts are vital. That is the meaning here. No cause other than discipline. This is stated very clearly. Next, we will discuss why a bodhisattva's discipline is praised. Because a bodhisattva upholds discipline, they receive praise. This is the reason.
Chirtir jamsuro dang lanji dang trashir nanag ma dang lanji yin tertir tsitrim wang shiv dang nichi tenchirwa dang lanji nim do.
Just as the ocean and a corpse cannot remain together, and just as black air and auspiciousness cannot coexist, So too, those great beings who uphold discipline do not delight in dwelling with the immoral. This section primarily explains how bodhisattvas actually uphold discipline, offering praise for their merits. There are two analogies presented, the first just as the ocean and a corpse. In the ocean there are generally many dragon kings, nagas. Great nagas play in the ocean. Now, whether it is the nagas or the very nature of the ocean itself, generally speaking, they will not remain together with a corpse. According to traditional theories, nagas love cleanliness. Corpses are considered impure. Therefore, if a body enters the water, it won't be allowed to stay there for long. It will surely be blown to the shore. There is a story about this. Once when the Buddha was reborn as a great merchant leader, many people entreated him to go to the ocean to retrieve treasures. He had already gone 6 times. Usually one shouldn't go after 6 times. If you do, a safe return is not guaranteed. The old merchant leader said, "I am old now and I've already been 6 times. I shouldn't go. If I go, we might not return successfully." But the people were very eager. So they took him to sea. They encountered a storm and all the ships were destroyed. After the ships were wrecked and everyone fell into the water, the merchant leader cut off his own head with a blade. He turned himself into a corpse and told the other merchants to cling to his body, because once a person dies, the body acts like a modern life jacket. It floats directly to the shore. This was actually an act of skillful means by the Buddha in a previous life to benefit beings. As a result, all those merchants were saved. So generally, whether because of the nagas or the ocean's own nature, corpses do not gather there. That is the first analogy. The second analogy concerns auspiciousness. We often talk about good luck and auspiciousness. The auspicious and the inauspicious cannot coexist. Auspiciousness is the absence of misfortune. Misfortune is the absence of luck. Black ear is another name for misfortune. Where there is auspiciousness, inauspiciousness is surely distant. They cannot be mixed together. The point of the analogy is this: the ocean cannot stay with a corpse, and auspiciousness cannot stay with black ear or inauspiciousness. By the same token, Bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi, a great being who upholds pure discipline, will not delight in, nor will their mental continuum ever delight in, mixing with the mental continuum of one who breaks the precepts. This works in two ways. First, for such a virtuous master, his surrounding circle will consist entirely of people with pure discipline. If a guru is a great master of discipline or a bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi, then his entourage, all of his disciples, will essentially be people with exceptionally pure discipline. My guru used to frequently cite this scriptural authority. He said that back when he relied upon Khenchen Thupten Chopel, it was just as described in Entering the Middle Way. On one hand, Khenchen Thupten Chopel himself maintained pure discipline. At the same time, his entourage also maintained pure discipline. Thus, my guru always believed Khenchen Thupten Chopel was a bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi. However, when he manifested passing into nirvana, my guru felt a bit of regret. He had thought his guru was on the Second Bhumi, but in the end, as described in the Tantras, all the signs of full accomplishment were manifested in his guru. So he had seen a Buddha as only a Second Bhumi Bodhisattva. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche said he regretted that. In our case, it's more likely that we might start by seeing our guru as a Buddha and end up seeing them as an ordinary person. That is a possibility, but His Holiness often spoke in this way. Based on this logic, the analogies here carry two layers of meaning. One layer is that, just like the two analogies mentioned before, for a great master of discipline on the Second Bhumi, it is fundamentally impossible for their mental continuum to be defiled by the afflictions of breaking precepts. The non-meritorious and non-virtuous nature of breaking precepts cannot mix with them. Their mental continuum is certainly pure. A Second Bhumi Bodhisattva is definitely pure. It is impossible for such a Bodhisattva to abide in a state of broken discipline. The other layer is that as a Second Bhumi Bodhisattva, their entourage, those who are around them, are all people of pure ethical discipline. By their very nature, they cannot be gathered together with those who lack discipline. Generally speaking, when a bodhisattva attains the bhumis, even the predators around them, beasts that would usually be full of aggression, like wolves or wild dogs, will live peacefully alongside goats and sheep. This is because the aggression in these animals' minds is naturally pacified. Thus, they no longer dwell as aggressive beings. Similarly, a bodhisattva of pure discipline will not have chaotic surroundings. It's impossible for them to be surrounded by a group of immoral people. So we used to often believe that His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche was an extraordinary Second Bhumi Bodhisattva. During his time in the world, he placed extreme emphasis on ethical discipline. At the same time, his entourage, the Larungar Buddhist Academy, was filled with great masters of pure discipline, gathering like a mass of clouds. This is why we often said in our private conversations, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche must truly be a bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi. We have indeed spoken of him in that way. So what is the main point we are discussing here? Essentially, what are the characteristics of a bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi? It is that they do not co-dwell with those who break precepts. Now, regarding auspiciousness and black year in auspiciousness, it reminds me of a verse in the 400 stanzas on the middle way. Are gathering and parting not simultaneous? There seems to be such a verse. In the commentary to this verse, Chandra Kirti explains that, generally speaking, gathering and parting are natural laws. Even though there is a gathering, for instance, we gather today, we will separate tomorrow, this shouldn't be a source of suffering. It is simply the way things are. Wherever there is a gathering, there must be a parting. Separation follows immediately. This is similar to the analogy of auspiciousness and black year. In auspiciousness, in Chandra Kirti's commentary, it says, auspiciousness is an auspicious goddess, while black year is an inauspicious demoness. A man was performing a ritual, and after his practice the auspicious goddess appeared, which showed that he had achieved accomplishment, and he was very happy. I've practiced for so long. Why have you only appeared now? But a moment later a hideous and terrifying demoness appeared. He asked, who is this? I am frightened. The auspicious goddess replied, she is inauspicious. Whenever I auspiciousness am present, inauspicious is also there. The two of us are always together. Chandra Kirti says in Entering the Middle Way that auspiciousness and black year cannot co-dwell. Yet the commentary to the 400 stanzas on the Middle Way says they are present at the same time. What does this mean? Actually, I'm not entirely sure. I think I may have taught this over 20 years ago. The idea is that in the commentary to the 400 stanzas on the Middle Way, it is mainly discussed in terms of relativity, dependence. For instance, where there is gathering, there must be separation. Where there is birth, there must be death. Where there is east, there must be west. Where there is a left, there is a right. They exist in relation to one another, even though they are opposites. East and west are opposites. Left and right are opposites. Birth and death are opposites. As long as one exists, the other definitely exists as well. From the perspective of relativity, as long as there is auspiciousness, inauspiciousness also exists. They may depend on each other or arise in alternation. However, here we are talking about the essential nature of things. For example, if I am a bodhisattva of the Second Bhumi, it is impossible for my mental continuum to contain the opposing afflictions. Likewise, in the place where a Second Bhumi bodhisattva resides, it is impossible for the surroundings to be full of immoral people. The discussion here is mainly from the perspective of a specific environment. The other perspective is primarily about the fundamental essence. In essence, auspiciousness is auspiciousness. It is certainly not inauspiciousness. On the other hand, perhaps this is from a conventional standpoint, while the other is from the relative perspective of the 400 stanzas on the Middle Way. I seem to recall in some of Tsongkhapa's writings it says these are two distinct persons. Auspiciousness is one person, and black year is another. At that time, Gorampa also refuted. Well, there were some refutations in his works on the Middle Way, specifically in his commentary on Entering the Middle Way. There are refutations there as well. But as for the specific details, I've forgotten, I can't recall them exactly. But perhaps it isn't necessary for us. We don't need to get into the refutations. The most important thing to understand now is that there are different methods of explanation. The 400 stanzas on the Middle Way here also has different interpretive approaches. Actually, in the words of my perfect teacher, auspiciousness and black year and auspiciousness and inauspiciousness are also mentioned. Essentially, if one exists just like the yin-yang symbol, both can arise in relation to each other. We often say where there is sunlight, darkness will surely occur. It is bound to be there. From this perspective, an opposing analogy is used here to illustrate the point. Much like light and darkness, you could put it that way. Next, the classifications of the perfection of ethical discipline.
Ganga Ganji, Ganglar Ponshe, Barsum Damuk by Yodna Tsatram De, Jikten by Power. Chunji Shadow Sum La Cherbe Dong Den Jikten De.
By whom, toward whom, and what is being refrained from. When these three are perceived, it is called worldly perfection. When all three are free from attachment, it is supramundane perfection. This section primarily explains the classifications of the perfection of ethical discipline. What are these classifications? One is the worldly mundane perfection of ethical discipline, and the other is the transcendental supramundane perfection. How are they distinguished? Actually, he is discussing the concept of the threefold emptiness of actor, object, and action. For instance, for any bodhisattva, if that bodhisattva perceives the one upholding the precepts, the object toward whom they are upheld, and the discipline itself as three distinct, truly existing things, if they are seen as real, then the characteristics of the three spheres are present. This is considered having perception or conceptual. In that case, it is called the worldly perfection. If I take the 8 one-day precepts today in a certain place, thinking about what my transgressions are, for example, not killing, if I think I am the one not killing, then consider the animals not being killed, and the nature of the precepts I am taking, if you believe these three are truly real, then this kind of discipline is called non-emptiness of the three spheres. It is the worldly perfection with conceptual signs. Does worldly perfection have merit? Yes, it does. However, its merit generally allows us to be reborn in the higher realms of humans or gods. For instance, by upholding discipline, I might be reborn in the celestial realms. By upholding discipline, I might obtain a human body in my next life. But what can it not become? A cause for liberation. It cannot be the direct cause for liberation. However, if all three of these factors are seen as empty, for example, regarding myself as the one upholding the precepts because of selflessness, all phenomena are without inherent existence. Even the one who upholds discipline, myself, does not truly exist, nor is the discipline that is upheld inherently existent. During the process of maintaining discipline, whether it's the transgressions or the act of not killing, if all three are realized as emptiness, this is known as the threefold emptiness. This kind of realization is actually the transcendental perfection. What can be obtained through the merit of transcendental perfection? One can obtain the three liberations, that is, the fruits of Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Currently, most people's practice of discipline basically serves as a cause for a good rebirth in the higher realms. They cannot yet truly achieve liberation. For instance, if I hold the bhikshu precepts, didn't we discuss this before? If a person thinks, I am a person of pure ethical discipline, then in a certain sense they are considered a breaker of precepts. This is not the ultimate view. Therefore, our worldly discipline is called contaminated with outflows. It can only be a cause for higher rebirth. It cannot fully be a cause for liberation. It has conceptual signs and is limited. If we can uphold the transcendental discipline of the threefold emptiness, then it is uncontaminated without outflows. Through this one can attain liberation. So comparing the two, there is a significant difference. Because of this, we recall the story from the Vimalakirti Sutra about the two bhikshus who went to Upali. When they arrived there, Upali rebuked them. You have broken the precepts, how terrible that is, and so on. The two were filled with deep sorrow, feeling that there was no hope for them. Later, when they went to see Vimalakirti, Vimalakirti even rebuked Upali. They already had an attachment to things being real. Now that they are in regret and pain, to increase their suffering in this way is not quite right. Then he explained that all phenomena are empty, teaching the principle of the threefold emptiness. In the end, they both attained liberation. So if we are truly sustained by the philosophy of prajnaparamita, emptiness, then the practitioner, the discipline, the environment of discipline, and the objects all are realized as emptiness. If it is upheld by the emptiness of all phenomena, whether the selflessness of persons or the selflessness of phenomena, this is the most ultimate liberation, the cause of liberation. Next, we conclude by discussing the qualities of the second Bhumi. The son of the Buddha, like a moon free from clouds and defilements, radiates stainless light. Though not included within the three realms of existence, he is the adornment and auspicious glory within them. Just like the clear radiance of the autumn moon, it dispels the burning afflictions in the minds of sentient beings. So this serves as a summary of the qualities of a bodhisattva on the second bhumi. In other words, the son of the Buddha on the second bhumi is compared here to the moon shining free from all dark clouds. Having left behind all defilements, it is called stainless light, the second bhumi bodhisattva. Now they are not contained by the three realms of existence. Since they have attained the second bhumi, it should be the second bhumi as just mentioned. A bodhisattva of the second bhumi does not belong to the three realms of existence. They are transcendent, they have already transcended, as stated in the Uttara Tantra Shastra. Bodhisattvas are free from karma and afflictions. They are also free from birth, aging, illness, and death. A bodhisattva on the second bhumi does not have these, so they do not belong to the three existences. Yet within the three existences, they serve as the adornment of the world. Though the second bhumi bodhisattva is in the three existences, even within samsara they become, for instance, within the four continents, someone who benefits sentient beings with complete freedom. If a world has a second bhumi bodhisattva, that is the adornment of the entire world, the auspiciousness of the whole world, so it is exceptionally meaningful. What are they like? Like the autumn moon which we mentioned earlier, the light of an autumn moon that is far removed from all stains. It can eliminate from the mental continuums of beings the burning anguish of failing to keep precepts, insecurity or regret, such mental fever and distress. When the moon shines and its light blankets the earth, all those beings suffering from feverish distress receive the cool nectar of its rays. They will suffer no longer. I believe it was Je Tsongkhapa who wrote a prayer that His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often quoted. It said, "May the power of my merit cause those bhikshus who have broken their precepts to enter into a discipline free of fault." This means Je Tsongkhapa made a vow back then. By the force of my virtuous aspirations, let those who have broken their precepts enter into stainless pure discipline. Our Guru also mentioned that generally in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a tradition of restoring precepts for those who have broken them. Je Tsongkhapa's intent was exactly that, to allow those who broke their precepts to take them again, giving them a fresh start in life and an opportunity to cultivate merit once more. He quoted this before. So the point here is that for a second bhumi bodhisattva, by relying on the light of their pure discipline, beings in the world who are unable to keep precepts, or even those who took them but later broke them, can all find cooling relief. It can bring them happiness. This implies that within this Saha world, there are times when we, including those who have been ordained before, or those who took lay precepts and later broke them, or even times when we want to practice well and make sincere aspirations, but later find those aspirations unfulfilled. It is impossible for all of us to possess perfect, truthful speech. To perfectly fulfill every single aspiration exactly as initially made is very difficult to achieve. But regardless, as long as we make virtuous aspirations, there is bound to be merit. Even if there are transgressions, there might be some slight faults, but the most important thing is to rely on the power of these bodhisattvas' pure aspirations combined with the power of one's own pure intention to dispel all defilements, burning anguish, and suffering. This is the summary of this chapter in Entering the Middle Way. The chapter on the ultimate bodhicitta of the second bhumi has now concluded. Chapter 3, the Luminous Bhumi. The Luminous Bhumi primarily covers three aspects. First, the definition of the bhumi itself. Second, the specific qualities and merits of the bhumi. Finally, a summary describing the merits of this bhumi. It is divided into these three sections. Starting with the first, the definition of the bhumi as the basis for distinguishing characteristics.
西西有像马里这本没文中是那三个生版的，我学把的的小这部啦的在尼尔达的zanji能完中。I
wonder if chanting it in Tibetan would take too much time. I just tested it out to see how long it takes to recite a verse. It took 12 seconds. I thought, well, in that case, chanting Tibetan in each class probably wouldn't be a problem. On one hand, by chanting in Tibetan, since I have received many lineages in Tibetan before, it also passes on a blessing to everyone. That is also my intention. The fire of wisdom consumes the fuel of all that is known. Therefore, this third bhumi is called luminous. Upon entering this Bhumi, the child of the Tathagata radiates a copper-gold glow like the dawn preceding the sunrise. This is relatively simple. It means that when reaching the stage of the third Bhumi Bodhisattva, it is called the Luminous Bhumi. Why is it called the Luminous? On the Luminous Bhumi, the fire of wisdom, primarily the wisdom within meditative equipoise, that fire of wisdom can burn away all dualistic concepts, the knower and the known, the object and the subject, as well as the antidote and what is to be abandoned. Every kind of duality, black and white, existence and non-existence, right and wrong, all of these are like dry grass or kindling wood. The meditative wisdom of a third Bhumi Bodhisattva burns them all away completely. For this reason, the wisdom of meditative equipoise on the third Bhumi burns away all that can be known as its fuel. Upon emerging from meditation, certain auspicious signs appear, reflecting that meditative wisdom. These signs do indeed occur. What are these signs like? As mentioned in the Nagarjuna's precious garland, it says that wisdom emits a peaceful light, which is why it is called the luminous Bhumi. So this bodhisattva, specifically the bodhisattva of the third Bhumi, after attaining this stage will manifest a certain appearance. What is it like? The stage of Buddhahood is like the sunrise itself, but before the sun rises, when we look at the horizon in the early morning, there is a faint reddish light before the sun has fully emerged, just like at dawn or when it is just about to appear. When watching a sunrise in the morning, before the sun comes out, an orange, yellow, crimson glow appears. What does this glow actually represent? In fact, what are we discussing when speaking of the third Bhumi Bodhisattva? First, they obtain a sign of wisdom. What does this sign of wisdom refer to? The state of Buddhahood is like the sunrise. Before that sunrise, it is like a crimson light appearing in the east. So before a bodhisattva attains the non-dual wisdom of a Buddha, while at the third Bhumi, certain special preliminary signs appear. Of course, there are different interpretations in the commentaries. Some explain it as literal, external red light. Such explanations exist among the various views. But generally speaking, these auspicious signs appear during the state of post-meditation for the bodhisattva. It doesn't mean that a third Bhumi Bodhisattva's physical body emits literal red rays. In the past, when some tutors didn't quite know how to explain this, I heard that some would say, for a third Bhumi Bodhisattva, their body glows, emitting a quite crimson light, slightly weaker than the sun's light, and so on. Sometimes, for those who aren't skilled at teaching, this kind of bold metaphor can sometimes sound rather amusing. This is something to be mindful of. Moving on to the specific qualities of this Bhumi, which primarily refers to its merits. This is divided into two parts, primarily explaining the supremacy of the perfection of patience on this Bhumi and other merits of the third Bhumi. Regarding the first part, the supreme perfection of patience, it is divided into three sections. The reason why patience is supreme on this Bhumi, the method of practicing patience, and the classifications of patience. Today we are discussing the first one, the supremacy of patience. The perfection of patience is highly predominant on this particular Bhumi.
Kartik nimen chigba nga yi te yi li nga te yi li la shan na rip che yin rang de chang re re chapar kyer kyang ti ge zupak chupar she la lhabar ki.
Even if someone without reason becomes enraged and cuts the flesh and joints of this body piece by piece over a long time, one's patience toward that cutter increases all the more. The text says here, suppose someone develops anger inappropriately. What is inappropriate? It means feeling anger, where anger should not be felt. Because a bodhisattva cares for all sentient beings with great compassion, they do not harm any being. Their body, speech, and mind are completely pure. By rights, if one is single-mindedly benefiting others, as the saying goes, if no one provokes me, I provoke no one, others should not without cause become angry with them or attack them. Generally speaking, a bodhisattva is an inappropriate object for anger. One should not be angry with a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva benefits all beings unconditionally. However, there are certain individuals who will still harbor such anger toward a bodhisattva, or who give rise to rage. Not only do they feel anger, but they also take the bodhisattva's body and use various weapons to harm them. We often use the phrase to be cut into 1,000 pieces. There were various weapons and methods. In the old days, there was death by 1,000 cuts, right? It was absolutely terrifying. cutting a piece of flesh today, another tomorrow, and specifically targeting the most painful and sensitive areas. This existed in ancient times and still does in some countries today. If a person is sentenced to death, it isn't always an immediate lethal injection or execution. It isn't like that. They make you endure being cut bit by bit. This was practiced before. Your entire skin might be flayed off and then the flesh slowly sliced away. This kind of method, a bodhisattva has never harmed any sentient being, yet these malicious beings, on the contrary, take this bodhisattva toward whom anger should never be felt and take their flesh, including bone and muscle, and bit by bit begin to sever, divide, and carve them up. Weighing out a pound of flesh today, another pound tomorrow. Some of the stories we hear are truly cruel. This could potentially still happen today. If this were the case, how would the bodhisattva react? Ordinarily, we might think, I have been so good to you. I have never harmed you. If you want to kill me today, just shoot me and get it over with. Do not torture me like this. Cutting a pound of flesh every day, severing a joint every day, causing me such suffering. What is your purpose? And so on. Our anger would likely only intensify. But as for the third Bhumi Bodhisattva, not only do they feel no resentment toward the attacker, they actually give rise to immense compassion for them. Their compassion I recall seeing in the Karmapa's commentary on entering the middle way. This section is outlined as increasing patience through compassion. The following section is increasing patience through wisdom. However, in Mipam Rinpoche's outlines, it isn't listed that way. It's simply the reasoning for the growth of patience. The point is, the bodhisattva feels even more pity for the person. They think this person has no reason to kill and harm me in this way. Because of this malicious intent and harm directed toward a noble one, this person will, for many aeons to come, suffer the agonies of the hell realms. At that point, compared to my current pain, their future suffering will be so much more pitiable. And for example, if they spend 5 days killing me, they might spend 5 aeons or 50,000 years in suffering, so they are the one truly deserving of pity. When the bodhisattva considers this person's future suffering, not only does their own pain vanish, but their compassion for the attacker grows even stronger. For instance, when they cut my flesh today, my compassion might not be that intense. But when they come to cut my flesh tomorrow, my compassion may become even deeper, and even more so the day after. In our case, it's usually, you hurt me today. For example, when we argue, you said this to me yesterday and you're saying it again today, then your resentment only keeps growing. Of course, we are not Third Bhumi Bodhisattvas. However, we can sometimes apply these principles. Practicing patience doesn't always require a logical reason. Many people argue today based on reasons. The truth is, when you argue from reason, it turns out everyone has their own. True reason is often hard to pinpoint, especially when karma manifests. Everyone feels they are in the right. The fact that you feel you have a reason is itself a type of karmic force, so it's hard to say. That's why I think a bodhisattva of the third Bhumi is truly extraordinary. They don't, there was a story once, a man was preparing to kill a noble one. But when the man was about to shoot him, the noble one said, "Wait just a moment. In a little while I will give you my consent to kill me." The man waited briefly. The noble one then rose into the air, and upon descending, passed away into nirvana through meditative poise. He didn't let the man commit the act of killing. He was afraid the karma the man would create would be too terrible. Thus there are such manifestations. But in discussing the third Bhumi Bodhisattva here, it is actually quite profound. Of course, some commentaries suggest this scenario is a hypothetical. It's used to illustrate how powerful the Bodhisattva's patience is. It doesn't necessarily mean it literally happens. It's a hypothetical to demonstrate the incomparably strong wisdom and strength of the third Bhumi. It should be understood in that sense. That's one view. Regardless, we should all recognize that the power of patience becomes increasingly strong on the third Bhumi. Just as the power of discipline is supreme on the second Bhumi, each perfection paramita possesses a supreme quality at its respective stage. This is the main principle being taught here. All right, we will stop here for today.
Kirgana Jirano Chukai Chupun Solen Drovajo Bandarangara Badna Asadorda
Om Bandhangara Padma Sada Om Bandhangara Padma Sadarda